Hello, and a very warm welcome indeed to this latest edition of Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And my guest today is a fascinating and rather unusual man because he is an expert on, get this, aggression. Here he is in person. Yeah? Jens Weidner. He's come all the way from Hamburg to be with us. Thank you very much for joining us here on Talking Germany today. Now, Professor Weidner is an educationalist and a criminologist whose specialist field is the prevention of aggression and violence. But, as I understand it, he also actually encourages the deliberate use, he's nodding while I'm saying this, he encourages, get this, the deliberate use of aggression in the workplace to help people to get to where they deserve to be. I got it right, yeah?
That was really fantastic.
Zusammengefasst.
Thank you. Wonderful. Right.
Ich dachte, ich beginne.
You begin with a little bit of praise for me. I'm going to begin in a way that's rather unusual. One golden rule for a talk show is that you should begin with something that's sort of a little bit feel-good, a little bit happy. I would, however, like to break all the rules and begin with a quote from an English philosopher over 300 years ago, Thomas Hobbes by the name, yeah, who said, "Life is nasty, brutish and short."
Und sagt, Homo homini lupus. Der Mensch ist
And he says, Homo homini lupus, man is man's wolf. It's very nice that you quote the only English philosopher I know. It makes me look like quite an educated type. Hobbes. Yes, he sheds light on the evil in people, the dark side. He's a representative of pessimistic anthropology. He acknowledged, correctly, that people are not naturally good. We all know that. Culture and religion help us to become better people. But not all Germans have managed that. But he is an interesting philosopher and doesn't shy away from illuminating our dark side.
Und hat überhaupt keine Hemmung, das Böse zu beleuchten, und deswegen finde ich ihn sympathisch.
Okay, we'll talk about evil in a little bit, but it is your contention, Professor Weidner, that human beings are naturally aggressive, naturally competitive.
Absolut.
Absolutely. The ability to love and to be aggressive is part of us from birth. Libido and thanatos, as they say in psychoanalysis. I don't know much about love, but I do know about aggression. For 10 years, I worked with violent offenders, with hooligans, skinheads, infamous thugs, people who like to get into fights and even kill others, murder them. As you can imagine, I mostly bumped into them when they were already in prison, where they belong and where they can be treated.
Und wie haben die dort behandelt?
You get to know a lot of interesting characters there.
Wirklich interessante Charaktere kennen.
Okay, you're talking about the world of crime there, people in prisons. What about yourself? Are you a peace-loving person?
Wenn man nett zu mir ist,
as long as you're nice to me. But basically, I try to appear as cultivated as possible, even if I'm not. I once asked my students during a lecture how many crimes they had committed, and of course I acted as if I hadn't committed any myself. But once, is this show only being broadcast outside of Germany? Once I added up mine. By the time I was 21, I had committed more than 20 crimes. Some less serious than others, there's no need to go into that now. And I became a better person once I started studying. If you don't, then you tend to lose your professorship. In Germany, you have to choose between being a professor or a criminal. And now I earn enough money through legal means, so there's no need to do anything else.
Fascinating insights, fascinating first impressions there from Jens Weidner. Here is more.
Aggressive young men are violent pimps. What's the best topic for a dissertation? That's just an example of the sort of things Jens Weidner discusses with his students. He's a professor for Educational Science and Criminology at the Hamburg School for Applied Sciences. The aggression researcher has lived and worked in Hamburg since 1995. Jens Weidner has been fascinated with aggression and how it can be controlled for more than 30 years. He's developed several treatment programs for violent adolescents and co-founded the German Institute for Confrontative Pedagogy. In his opinion, aggression can have its useful side, and so he also works as a career coach and management consultant. Jens Weidner was born in 1958. As a boy, he joined the Scouts, and as a young man, he was drawn to the United States. After studying social work, he went to Philadelphia, where he gathered some crucial work experience working with violent gang members. That experience laid the foundations for his future work. The 56-year-old professor has an eye for the lighter side of life and a weakness for good food. So he's often found exploring the gourmet cuisine around Hamburg's harbor area. And today, he's our guest on Talking Germany, Jens Weidner.
What a life you live there in Hamburg. Deck chairs in front of the university building and gourmet restaurants in the middle of the day. Yeah?
Oh, yes, that's Hamburg. Do come to Hamburg one time. It's one of Germany's most cultural places. I don't think there's a contradiction in showing social engagement by paying lots of taxes and wanting to enjoy life at the same time. In fact, I think they go hand in hand.
Okay, that's an interesting description of Hamburg. Yeah. Well, yourself, you talked about the criminal side of yourself. You talked about your criminal past. Yeah. Nevertheless, I found an interesting quote from you. You said that you were born on the sunny side of life.
Absolutely. But you can also see that by the fact that I was never caught. I don't have a criminal record, and I'd like to stress that here. I came from a good home. I was well treated, and in times of trouble, I was given a lot of support. I have a wife who still loves me after 30 years, and children, a daughter and a son, who were kind to me. I have a decent job in a great city in Germany, which is a very pleasant country. Yes, it's life on the sunny side.
Doch, das ist sunny side.
Okay, the sunny side of life. So you came from the sunny side of life. You had a family that supported you, that encouraged you. What prompted you to move towards studying aggression, violence?
Ja, das ist echt jetzt wieder eine Frage.
That's another question that's really hard to answer. At some point, I just realized that I can do it. I was a really lazy student. I had a camper van, and I was a windsurfer. Whenever the wind got up, I headed off to Sylt or the North Sea and skipped school. Then I did an internship in the U.S. and spent half a year with violent gang members in Philadelphia.
What did you learn there?
It was most interesting. I learned that if you're focused, if you really try to do something, the American way of life, so to speak, that even the biggest waster can become a specialist in his own field. I learned about an incredibly successful way of treating people, a method of aggression therapy at Glen Mills Schools in Philadelphia. I learned that a weak-chested guy like me can work with real thugs if there's a good concept involved. And it was a good concept.
Describe the concept.
Well, they really focused on misbehavior. And with delinquent kids, there's a lot of misbehavior. The idea is to confront the small issues and so prevent the big ones from happening in the first place. In Germany, at the same time, it was the other way around. We let things go into a sort of pseudo-tolerance and only get involved when something big happens. That hasn't really proved itself as a teaching concept. So I stole the American concept. Well, I asked my American colleagues for permission, and they gave it. I took it to Germany and built up a program to treat repeat violent offenders, and got it officially patented as well because I was afraid it might be successful. And when you are successful, that's another German trait, people steal from you.
And can you quantify the level of success that you have had with this approach?
We're treating about 3,000 thugs a year in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Luxembourg. 2/3 are successful. They stop being violent.
2/3.
Of the third that reoffend, half of those are less violent. In other words, they still punch you in the face, but you won't end up in intensive care. It's still not nice to get hit, but it's not quite as painful. And the remaining half not only reoffends, but they get worse. I say that's despite our methods. Our critics say it's because of them. You can't get academics to agree.
Listen, you indicated that Hamburg is a relatively prosperous city, but it's a mixed picture because Hamburg is very wealthy on the one hand. There are also poorer quarters.
Absolutely.
You've talked about your experience working with kids in Philadelphia, in New York and in Washington, I think it was. How much is, when we talk about where does all this aggression come from, how much has it got to do with how people grew up in terms of sort of class?
Well,
there are two types. On the one hand, a society that's not doing well economically always produces losers in this modernization process. People who aren't doing well and who are left by the wayside and are angry about it. Some beat others up, some take drugs, some commit suicide. It's not nice. The better society works, the better off we are. You can see that in every statistical chart. You can almost always say that aggressive children had an aggressive upbringing. There are German families that are bringing their children up terribly. Parents hit the children, husbands hit their wives, and children have to watch.
Because it's interesting, you've shifted the balance a little bit in the debate, because I asked you about society and about people's, whether people living in poverty is perhaps a root of aggression.
Absolutely.
And now you've shifted it onto the family. Yeah? Where is the sort of the line between those two, or the connection between those two aspects?
I'd have to say from my experience, the people we're asked to treat are sent to us by a judge. It's not as if they come to us and say, give me therapy. We get people who are having a hard time economically and people who had a violent upbringing. It affects everything else. There's a trilogy of aggression. You have aggressive parents, you have aggressive friends, and you watch aggressive films. And that's the best mixture if you want your child to grow up to be a thug. It's perfect.
Top.
Okay. So, what we've learned a little bit is that all of us can have good and bad emotions depending on how we've been educated, the influences on us. All of us have the potential to be aggressive, including, of course, children. And the question is, can we learn to manage or perhaps to channel our anger? Let's have a look. Professor Weidner, do you actually work with children who are sort of real juniors, the kind of kids that we saw at the beginning of that report?
Yes. Zandvoss, who we just saw, also works in the same way as we do, and he does a fine job. Of course, if you talk to kindergarten helpers or junior school teachers, they'll tell you sometimes, we've got some children who just stink of trouble. We have to act now. And they're right.
What does that mean when you say, how do they see this?
Their reactions are exaggerated. You ask, can you pass me the milk? And they knock the milk bottle over and say, I'm not giving you anything. And they're like this. And then they go to the teacher and insult her with some word connected to a woman's lower body. What is that? The kid will be 6 or 8, and you've got to talk to them. Of course, you can't grill them. You have to make it into a game. You show the little boy that he won't lose face if he finds another way to resolve it. You can apologize and find that everyone will praise you.
It's very important, isn't it? The ability to be able to say sorry is very, very important.
It's very important. I also work in the area of management. So if you make a mistake on Friday, you can go and apologize to your colleague on Monday. I'd always do it on Monday, so they can sweat over it over the whole weekend. That was a joke, by the way.
Yeah. Listen. We're talking about Germany. Germany is the backdrop to what we're talking about here. Germany likes to view itself as a peace-loving society. Is it a peace-loving society? You laugh when I ask the question.
And let the Germans continue to do so. After all, we started 2 world wars. We murdered vast numbers of people in factories. So there is good reason for this country to be as peaceful as it can be. But in business matters, we're far from peaceful. We act all cultivated. We don't make hostile takeovers. We just buy up the company. German firms are trying hard to be top global players, and once they reach a certain size and strength, they can start acting all cultivated. That's what Germans are like. They seem cultivated, but they know when they can play an aggressive game. Germans are not violent per se, but they're also not naive. And that's how we want to do business. Especially with Britain.
Gerade mit Briten.
Why that? Why?
Ja, weil die Briten uns manchmal ärgern.
Yes, because the Brits sometimes annoy us.
Ich musste da einen Vortrag halten.
I was in Birmingham recently,
Habe ich wieder nicht in Englisch.
and I gave a lecture, and once again, my English wasn't good enough.
Professor Weidner, I must explain, is a little bit ashamed of the fact that his English isn't as good as the rest of his sort of package. Yeah, go on.
Ja, genau. Und ich bin
Well,
Ihnen
that's
dankbar,
right.
dass ich Deutsch sprechen darf. Und nach 30 Minuten
After 30 minutes, a British academic said to me that I was coming across like a tank. And I thought, there they go again. The Brits are trying to provoke me. And that's the problem. The people of Hamburg love Brits, but it's only partially requited. It's a bit one-sided, although I can tell you that you are very well disposed to me.
Okay, let's get back to the problem, the problems that are sometimes posed by young people here in Germany. Youth violence is something that people talk a lot about in Germany. Yeah. Is it on the rise? Is it a more serious threat than it has been in the past? And how do you deal with it? A lot of the politicians say boot camps is the right approach, a get tough approach. Are they right? Are they wrong?
Also die Bootcamps wrong.
Well, boot camps are wrong. Youth crime and violence in Germany comes and goes in waves. But on the whole, it's going down. There's less of it around, and not just in people's heads, because it's reported more heavily. In my area of study, we call it media criminology. One spectacular act of violence gets covered by 10 TV channels, 20 newspapers or more. They report on the act itself, on the trial, and on the verdict. 3 times, and everyone thinks the country is being overrun by brutal gangs of youths. That's not really what this country is like. It's one of the safest countries in the world, but that's still a problem. What works, and what we're doing here, is when something happens, we react straight away. Boot camps are more militaristic, and the Americans really love them. In Germany, there's no point in discussing them. We don't work like that.
Okay. With your expertise, with your knowledge in the field, your great knowledge in the field, can you, when you enter a room, do you look at people and do you identify the people who have got a sort of a higher potential for aggression?
Ich riech das.
I can smell it.
Wirklich.
Really?
Es ist furchtbar.
You were going to say this.
Ich sitze in der
I'll be sitting on the
How
train,
quickly okay,
and I can
sorry.
spot one right away.
Und sehe, das ist so einer.
I won't look at him or provoke him. I don't go up to him and say, I'm a professor of criminology, Mr. Weidner. That's a great way to get hit. But you can spot it. You get a feeling for it. I was in with them for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. You can tell. But they smell me too. You can also tell with managers when they're trying to be all peaceful, but inside they're exploding, boiling over.
Pazifistisch tun, aber innerlich
Yes, you can feel it.
krachen, brodeln. Also, doch, das spürst du.
There are people, and we're talking about Germany here, there are a lot of people in Germany where, coming from other countries, people are often surprised by how many people say, I don't have an aggressive bone in my body. I am a non-aggressive person.
Ja.
Does such a if somebody says that to you, what do you think?
Dass sie
I
lügen.
think they're lying.
Also,
Everyone has
jeder hat
aggression
das
in them.
sich. Sie können
They can
damit
try to be
motiviert
cultivated
umgehen.
about it.
Das versuche
I
ich
try to
auch
do that
mit
too
meiner
with my
Aggression.
aggression.
Ich mache Sport.
I do
Zum Beispiel.
sports,
Das tut
that
mir
helps.
Ich
I
habe
have
auch
revenge
Fantasien.
fantasies.
Das tut mir
That's
auch
also a
sehr
big
gut.
help.
Also ich setze
But I
mich
don't carry them out.
Fantasie ist der letzte rechtsfreie Raum.
Your imagination is outside legal jurisdiction. You can do whatever you want.
Und vielen anderen auch. Aber
That's a
jemand,
help
der
to me
sagt,
and to many
ich
others.
leugne das sind Menschen,
But there are
und das ist
people
gar
who
nicht
deny
lustig.
that,
Die
and that's
werden
not
häufig
funny.
autoaggressiv.
They often become auto-aggressive. They start to drink too much or try to bury their feelings of guilt inside. It's not really healthy to be auto-aggressive. But anyone who says of themselves, I'm completely peaceful, doesn't exist. They're
Kenn
lying.
ich nicht.
Okay.
Lügt.
One last question here before we move on. Have you used your own anti-aggression therapy strategies on yourself? Do you sometimes have moments where you're fuming or you're about to lose your top and then you say to yourself, and what do you do?
Ja, ich versuche immer nicht zu reagieren.
I try not to react.
Ich kann mich noch an eine Therapiesitzung
I remember a
erinnern,
therapy session where we were doing provocation tests, such as when someone says, "Whenever anyone touches my knee, I freak out and hit them." So we touch his knee. Don't worry, I won't try it on you. Personally, for some reason, I hate it when someone fiddles around with my tie.
Wenn man an meiner Krawatte rumfummelt.
I don't know how this thug figured it out, but he started fiddling around with my tie, and I started getting more and more aggressive, and I was about to smack him one when I remembered, I'm the therapist. You can't do that. I'm supposed to be in control. But we all have these weak spots, and I say I just admit it and learn to live with it. It's okay.
When I was younger, what I used to do, if somebody annoyed me, what I would do is count to 3. 1, 2, 3, before even beginning to react.
Das ist sehr gut.
You know what I do now? I count to 4.
To 4?
Works even better, yeah? Now, it would seem that in the corporate world, there are 2 main ways of motivating employees. Number 1 is give people the feeling that they are involved, that they are part of a team. Number 2, rivalry, competition, dog against dog. I personally am a wishy-washy team player. Maybe I need some advice from Jens Weidner, but first, this report. So, Professor Weidner, what I said before that report that I am a wishy-washy team player type, and what we saw in that report was that companies that have wishy-washy team-playing structures actually do quite well. But you go into the companies and you say, guys, be ferocious, be fierce, use your elbows.
Nee, überhaupt nicht.
No, not at all. You clearly haven't prepared this interview very well. I think team play is great when it works. When people work together, when I have a great idea and share it with you and you make it even better, that's a real win-win for all of us. But there's another reality, a different one.
Ich habe schon gehört, dass Sie
You see,
Humor
they said you had a sense of humor. A hot pepper. When you hear the term lean management, that's another way of saying unemployment for career-minded people in Germany. It's when we restructure, when we say, we're going to slim down the company, or we have to fire some people and others will have to go to work at the plant in Kazakhstan. That's when things get competitive. That is unpleasant. I don't think it's necessary, but it does happen. And I want people to see through the power games that are played. But not so long ago, someone tried a power game with me, and I thought, how stupid. I write books about that, and I know what I'm talking about. And I told him, hey, that's on page 172 of my book. And he looked it up and said, there's no point in doing that with you. I said, I know. And then we had a perfectly normal chat about it.
So explaining power structures to workers is liberating. That's your theory.
Ja, es macht
what
wenig
about the
Sinn.
pepperoni?
Sie brauchen eine gewisse Schärfe.
Well,
Und
you
ich
need to
sage immer,
spice things up a bit.
80% ein feiner Mensch.
I'd say be 80% a good person, gentlemanlike. That's enough. But add 20% bloody-mindedness, as they say in Munich, Hinterfotzigkeit.
Und in München sagt man Hinterfotzigkeit.
It's a wonderful German word, that one.
Ja,
And I can't wait to see how you translate it. So, respect is the product of your fairness, your special skills, and a touch of fear. And that's what the 20% accounts for, the fear.
Und die 20% sind für die Angst zuständig. Also der
It's
andere...
interesting. It is about making other people just a little bit frightened
Ja,
of
der
you.
andere
Yes,
muss
the other
wissen,
side's got to know
dass
that if
einen
they play with me, it's going to
Preis
cost
zahlen
them.
wird, wenn mit mir spielt.
Okay. And when you are helping people to develop their skills and their understanding and their capacities in this direction, are you talking more to women or talking more to men? It would seem to me that women have the greater deficit because we're told all the time that women are less aggressive than men.
Ja, jetzt kriegen Sie bestimmt Beschwerden.
Okay,
von
now you're going to
allen
get
Zuschauern,
lots
ne?
of complaints from your female viewers.
Kurioserweise war es
Strangely
genau
enough,
umgekehrt.
it was the other way
Bis
around
vor
10 years
Jahren
ago. It was
waren
just
nur
men.
Männer da. Seit 10 Jahren
For the
gab es
last
immer
10
mehr
years,
Frauen, die sich
more and
auch
more women have been trying to get
sich
somewhere,
positionieren
often
wollen,
quite
aber auch
aggressively.
mit Biss. Auch die möchten nicht
They don't want to be
unterschätzt
underestimated
werden, nur
just
weil sie
because
schönes
they're
blondes
blonde.
Haar haben. Nicht wahr?
They want to
Also die
make a
möchten
clear
auch eine klare
statement,
Ansage
and
machen
we are helping them.
und wir supporten sie dabei. Also diese Ansagen
It's
auch
good if
machen
other
zu können.
people can see that you're not just good.
Es ist gut, wenn die
It's enough to be loved by your wife, your mother-in-law, and your pets. And when it comes to your job, you want people to think you're fair, and you want them to respect you, but please don't try to be loved.
Okay. There's a personal aspect to all that you're telling me, because I understand that there's a quote. I've got a quote from you. Until I was 34 years old, I was one of the sheep, you said, what was the... Tell me a little bit more about the sheepish Jens Weidner.
Das habe ich Ihnen
Did I
gesagt.
say that?
Ja, stimmt wirklich.
Well, it's true. I was a sheep. Sheep are people who put 100% into their jobs. I worked myself stupid. I was exhausted. I wanted to get ahead. That's typically German. But I never got promoted, and I never understood why. I applied for another job, but I didn't get it. And when I did change and became a professor, I asked my old boss about it. I said, I never understood why none of my job applications were successful. And he said, you really didn't get it? I said, no. And he said, when you applied somewhere, they rang me and asked me what I thought of you. And I said, he's a great guy, top class, super chap, a real bonus to have him working for you. And they all said they'd take me. And then he said to them, in parting, but the chemistry has to be right. If not, he'll be like your ex-wife. And they all said, you keep him. And so I asked him, why did you do that? And his answer was, he was a funny sort of guy, he said, you've worked so hard for me that I've got my golf handicap down under 10. Welcome to Germany. Not everyone is like that, but it happens.
Aber das passiert.
Interesting stuff there. Now, when Jens Weidner isn't trying to get people to be less or more aggressive, he enjoys being, and these are his own words, on really boring islands. Well, Germany's north coast certainly has quite a few to choose from, and one of the professor's favourites is, the pronunciation is difficult for me, Langeoog in East Frisia. I think I got it right.
On the horizon, Langeoog comes into view, with its seemingly endless sandy beaches. There are no taxis or buses waiting. The island railway takes visitors from the port to the town in less than 10 minutes. Everything can be reached from here, but only on foot or by bicycle. In the tourist season, it can get crowded. In the dune belt, by contrast, there's nothing but peace and quiet. Like all the East Frisian islands, Langeoog has a wild and gentle side. Windswept beaches face the side open to the North Sea. On the side facing the mainland are the tidal mudflats of the Wadden Sea. Twice every 24 hours, the water recedes, revealing one of the world's richest habitats. Our guide takes us through the shallow water and opens our eyes to life in the mud, from the tiny mud snail to the fat lugworm.
This is my first time here, and I'm amazed by all you can find. It's so incredibly beautiful.
We'll definitely come again.
I think it's great how he explains everything, and it's fun to walk through the mud and eat this marsh samphire. It's great and exciting.
Environmental scientist Pjotr Weinbecker introduces us to Langeoog's bird life. Arctic breeders stop to rest here on the Wadden Sea. Bar-tailed godwits, herring gulls, and sandpipers. The Wadden Sea is also a nursery for seals. They come in late May from the open North Sea and populate the sandbanks. You can get quite close to them on a cutter. Living in tune with the seasons requires close observation of nature. The islanders do that as a matter of course. It's the only way they can deal with nature's forces.
Jens Weidner, you know the island very well indeed. Just tell me, did I get the pronunciation right? Langeoog.
Perfect.
Good. What does it mean?
It means a long island. It's stretched out with more than 20 kilometers of sandy beaches. And when I say long, I mean it. At a city dweller in a fantastic way. It's so peaceful when I go jogging there. I hardly meet anyone for 20 kilometers. I feel like Robinson Crusoe. When it's foggy, the sand, the fog, and the sky all blur into one, and you don't know where you're running. I feel like God. It's crazy, I know, but you can really enjoy it. There's nothing like status on Langeoog, unlike in the rest of Germany, which is the opposite. Expensive cars, expensive suits, expensive houses. You don't get that on Langeoog. On the contrary, that's why so many people love it, including my family.
Very interesting. The Democrat Jens Weidner there, yeah, putting in his plea for equality in German society. Yeah. Tell me about the mudflats, this Watterwanderung that the Germans so love. It's something that's just not familiar to me at all. What's the great attraction there?
I never go hiking in it because it's too muddy. I prefer the sand. I know some people love it, but I'm not so keen on it. There's something called a Watt cake. I love that. But you get that from a bakery. No, I really don't like walking on the mudflats.
Okay, but there is one more. But on this very, very boring island, there is one more attraction. Apart from the fact that the highest elevation is 21 meters high, I discovered. That's the Melkhorn Dune.
Ja, das stimmt.
Yeah, you've been up it? Yeah. All the way to the top?
Ja, als Hamburger mag
coming from Hamburg, I don't really like hills, but that's one I feel at home on.
Also mit dem ich mich sehr wohlfühle.
You've conquered it.
Ja.
Yes, when I'm up there, I feel really high up.
How do the police and how do doctors get around the island?
Ja, es gibt dort keine.
Well, there aren't really any. There are 2 electric cars. One is the ambulance in case anyone has an accident on the mudflats to get him to a ship. And one to carry water crates in so we have something to drink. They're too heavy and they drink a lot there. Apart from that, it's just quiet.
Ja, mehr gibt es dort nicht. Sonst ist dort Stille.
And you too have a bike for getting around the island?
I have a bike. I rent it there and cycle around.
That's interesting because you're a car man, aren't you? You've got a reputation for being you're a sports car guy.
Ja, ich fahre bevorzugt
I prefer a German brand by the name of Porsche.
Und muss auch sagen,
one of the best-known examples of controlled aggression on 4 wheels.
Absolut. Bei Porsche müssen Sie nicht
To be
aggressiv
sure,
sein.
with a Porsche you don't need to be aggressive. I just drive and people get out of my way. It's fantastic, but I do have to tell anyone watching that I only buy these cars from the income from the books I write. And right now I'm trying to make a new investment.
Einer kauft es noch, weil ich gerade in einem neuen Investment bin.
Okay, we've got to move on. We're talking of books. We're going to talk about a book that's lying down here on the table in a second. But before we get there, there's one thing that we have forgotten to talk about that you mentioned in passing. We've talked about, whether people are naturally aggressive or not. We've talked about sort of the human condition. One thing we haven't talked about really properly is evil. You have met a lot of people in prisons. You have met a lot of people who have committed serious crimes, cruel crimes. Is evil a useful category for describing people and for working with people or understanding them in some way?
Wenn wir an die Kriminellen denken,
when we think of criminals, that accounts for maybe 5% of them. Most criminals can be helped with treatment or resocialization. But there is a small percentage where we have to get the psychologist in. They're really unbelievably evil. It's very advisable to lock these people up and never let them out again. That doesn't always happen in Germany. In Germany, they say the maximum penalty is a life sentence, and that means 15 years. But I know a lot of people who have been in jail for 35 years in this country. They probably should be, too. Yes, some people really are evil.
Okay. And talking about evil, talking about good and evil, we like to get our guests to bring along a cherished possession. This is your cherished possession. You pulled it out of your jacket earlier, yeah? Goethe's Faust, yeah?
Goethe's
a tale of good and evil, really, yeah?
Ja, erstmal ist Faust
well, to begin with, Faust is part of German culture. It's Goethe. He really was an educated man, much more than I am. I never managed to understand Faust Part 2, no matter how clever it is. But in Faust Part 1, he describes life the way it really is. The way he treats Gretchen, the way he treats women so things work out. I've been happily married for 30 years, and you learn a lot about how people are.
Terrible, tragic end that comes to Gretchen, of course.
All right, you don't have to make the same mistakes as Faust makes in the end. But you learn something from Mephisto, that people often want to do good and end up doing evil. And it's this duality that captures the essence of life so well, and in rhyme form over hundreds of pages.
And when you're reading your wee little Faust book, do you identify more with Faust and his striving for knowledge, or do you identify more, you personally, with Mephistopheles?
Just Mephisto. I love him. I think he uses irony and humor in his Mephistophelian way to reveal the dark sides of our world. And that's my job too. I describe and treat the dark sides of violent offenders. And I often see the dark sides of managers too, and sometimes I'd like to make them even darker.
You're talking there about the dark side of the human persona once again. I know that you are a member, final question, of a club in Hamburg called the Optimists Club. What are you so optimistic about?
Well, first off, I believe in the good in us. People can be changed for the good.
I'm relieved, yeah?
Germans have this reputation for being maudlin and moany.
Really? It's always said, I don't know.
Very good.
Well, that's why we founded the Optimists Club, along with people who, when things are going badly, still say their glass is half full. And I like that. And they laugh a lot.
Normally, Jens Weidner, at the end of the show, the music's coming up, we have a quiz. I only have time for one question. Are human beings fundamentally good or fundamentally bad?
Good.
Good. That is your lot with Jens Weidner. What a fascinating guest he has been. If you've enjoyed his company as much as I have, then do come back next week. Until then, bye-bye and